The moral argument is very important to our understanding of right and wrong. The argument has two premises that, if both are true, the conclusion logically follows, meaning that it has to be true as well. Here's the argument. Premise 1: if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. Premise 2: objective moral values and duties do exist. Therefore, God does exist. Let's begin with explaining the difference between objective versus subjective. Objective values and duties means that things are right or wrong independent of people's opinions. Subjective means that it is dependent on people's opinions. Objective moral values and duties mean something is right or wrong no matter what anyone else thinks. Our first piece of support for premise 1 is that without a moral law, there would be no way to measure moral differences. For example, if there were no true answer to the question, what's 2 plus 2? There would be no basis to say that any answer was wrong. Every answer would be equally valid. The same goes for morality. If objective moral values and duties do not exist, then all of our feelings of justice and injustice are completely meaningless. There's no answer better than another. Is it morally true to say that murder is wrong? Yes. Morality without God is just a matter of subjective opinions. I like chocolate, you like vanilla. One other piece of evidence for this premise is that people can't live consistently with the statement that there are no absolute moral values. Think about it. We know that to be lied to, hurt, and betrayed is not the same as for those things to not happen to us. The common objections to this premise all boil down to subjective morality and thus actually support this first premise. One example: if morality is just whatever the society you live in decides, then it actually is subjective morality because it's purely dependent on people's opinions. Let's move on to support for premise 2. First, our reactions to different situations are evidence that objective morality does exist. We get rightfully upset if someone lies, betrays, or steals from us. Second, God's law is written on our hearts. Romans 2:14 through 15 says, indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times defending them. C.S. Lewis wrote, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I gotten this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. We recognize the difference between right and wrong, and that it is not simply an opinion. Some might give a half-hearted objection to objective morality, but within a couple questions will show that they actually agree with the second premise. Is it okay to torture people for fun? Is it objectively wrong for someone to steal all your stuff from you? Is tolerance the same as intolerance? Is loving your neighbor the same as hating your neighbor? Obviously, morality transcends our subjective opinions. These two premises lead us to the conclusion: therefore, God does exist. To recap, if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. Objective moral values and duties do exist. Therefore, God does exist. God is the standard of goodness. He is absolutely holy, perfect, and good. For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations. Psalm 100, verse 5. As a bonus, here's another logically airtight version of the moral argument. Premise 1, every law has a lawgiver. Premise 2, there is a moral law. Premise 3, therefore, there is a moral lawgiver.